Good evening and thanks for joining us this Sunday, July 14th. I'm Hari Srinivasan. We're on the road here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In exactly 1 year, the Democratic National Convention will be here. It's the first time in history that either party has come here to begin the final leg of the presidential campaign. The newly built Pfizer Forum, home of the Milwaukee Bucks, will welcome thousands of visitors and delegates from across the country. It is not a coincidence that this is in Wisconsin, a very important battleground state in the 2020 election. We'll have more on that and more from here in Wisconsin after the news summary. Before arriving at his Virginia Golf Club this morning, the President of the United States attacked 4 members of Congress on Twitter, suggesting that they should go back to the places from which they came. In the first of 3 tweets, President Trump referenced progressive Democratic congresswomen who, quote, originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe. It's likely Mr. Trump was targeting 4 Democratic women. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who represents New York and was born there. Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, who was born in Cincinnati. Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who was born in Detroit. And Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota. All are U.S. citizens, only Omar was born in a foreign country. In his second tweet, Mr. Trump said, quote, why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? In the third, the president wrote, you can't leave fast enough. I'm sure that Nancy Pelosi would be very happy to quickly work out free travel arrangements. The Speaker of the House responded, quote, rather than attack members of Congress, he should work with us for humane immigration policy. The tweets came on the day the administration said was the beginning of immigration and customs enforcement raids in cities across the country, targeting undocumented immigrants who have received deportation orders. Immigrants and activists were prepared, but by this afternoon, there was no sign of a massive law enforcement operation. NewsHour Weekend's Ivette Feliciano has the latest from New York City, where protests continued today.
Hari, here in New York, there have been a number of protests like the one you see behind me here in this heavily immigrant neighborhood of Jackson Heights, Queens. The main message here is one of communities coming together to protect individuals and families who are at risk of being swept up by immigration authorities. Immigrant rights advocates and lawyers say they've been preparing for these raids ever since President Trump announced them on Twitter weeks ago.
People are changing the way that they act. Some people are choosing not to go to work because of announcements about the raids. They're not taking their children to school or to summer camp. We're even hearing that people aren't showing up to court to go to the regular immigration check-ins, or in some cases not even to report things like domestic violence because they're scared of the repercussions they might face.
Jackie Zamuto works for Witness, an international human rights organization that trains people on how to legally film what they say are manipulative tactics by federal agents when they arrest undocumented immigrants.
They're known to use tactics that trick people out of their homes, that are misleading. For example, they'll show up in unmarked cars or wearing uniforms that say police when it's actually immigration enforcement. They do not have the authorization to enter people's homes without consent or without a judicial warrant, and they do try to trick people into letting them in.
Witness and other immigrant rights organizations are disseminating Know Your Rights information to those being targeted by ICE, which includes things like not opening the door for agents when they come knocking. They also encourage immigrants to form a buddy system so that everyone is accounted for and not lost in the shuffle. That's because of the supposed collateral arrest of individuals who aren't being targeted by ICE, but who might end up being detained anyway.
They're taping their windows, they're heading into the basement, they're locking their doors, they're not coming out for the next few days, just trying to weather this out. That's how terrified people are.
Longtime immigrant rights activist Ravi Ragbir is executive director of the New Sanctuary Coalition. He says last night the group received reports about federal agents in Brooklyn and in Harlem. Ragbir says federal raids aren't new under the Trump administration, but the heightened level of fear they produce certainly is.
So it ultimately is not different. Obama is the deportant chief. He deported over 3 million people. A lot of our families have been destroyed. What is the difference now is that this administration is coming at it with the violence.
The New Sanctuary Coalition actually pairs hundreds of undocumented immigrants with volunteers who accompany and advocate for them in immigration proceedings, and it plans to coordinate many more protests like this one in the coming days as immigration raids continue.
Tropical storm Barry is showing signs of weakening as it slowly moves across Louisiana and into neighboring states today. But authorities warn there is still the potential for dangerous flash flooding. The National Hurricane Center warned that up to 20 inches of rain could be possible in some areas, along with dangerous storm surges. Barry is expected to move through central and northern Louisiana today and into Arkansas Monday. Power crews fully restored electricity to the west side of Manhattan late last night after a failure left the area in the dark for at least 3 hours. Subway trains were delayed, Broadway shows and concerts were canceled, and elevators stopped as New Yorkers tried to navigate through the darkness on a busy Saturday night. The outage, which started around 7 p.m., began with an explosion at a Con Edison substation in Midtown and left 73,000 people without power at its peak. There were more demonstrations in Hong Kong today as protesters and police confronted each other for the second day in a row. Tens of thousands gathered to protest police brutality and called for the resignation of Hong Kong's chief executive. In a separate march, Hong Kong journalists gathered in front of government offices to complain that police beat and obstructed reporters during previous demonstrations. The U.S. Army identified Sergeant Major James G. Ryan Sartor as the American service member killed in Afghanistan yesterday. Sartor, 40, was a decorated Green Beret from Teague, Texas, and first joined the Army in 2001. The Army said Sartor was killed during combat operations. He was the 12th U.S. service member to die in Afghanistan this year.